I send him an email, and it's just so presumptuous and so completely crazy. Basically offering my services. I just put out a CD, And shockingly, the guy wrote back and he said, just send me the CD. That sounds kind of interesting. I can't remember what I said about it. And I don't know how desperate they were, or if he just wanted to do something crazy, but I sent him the CD and he liked the CD, so he's like, "Hey, why the hell not?" And so I did get paid for that show, but it was maybe $100, and back then it took me about $500 to get out there, which I think now would probably be a great deal, but. So $400 loss to do it, but
the story, the Borderline's a famous venue, and then the fact that you got to open for the leader of your favorite band,
right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's crazy, and actually, the experience of meeting him was not that great. I was terrified. Just he. In those days, if he wasn't in a good mood, he would not make it easy for people that were wanting to talk to him.
Gotcha.
And I probably put my foot in my mouth every which way you could do it. Mm-hmm. So I think I made zero impression on him, or if I did make an impression, it wasn't a good one. But at that point, I had met him, so I was... I was, that was kind of, and maybe it's still in my personality, that is once you have the foot in the door, you just kick it in,
Sure.
And so then I was doing the MFA program, and I had to figure out something to write about, and I thought, well, the only thing I could possibly think of writing 300-odd pages on would be my favorite band. Everything else, I think it would drive me crazy, and so I got a hold of Steve Kilby's email and emailed him and said I was working on this book, and I was kind of tiptoeing around this subject of drugs because I knew he was or had been a heroin addict, and I think I might have said something in the email about, I'm going to respect your privacy or whatever, and he writes back, and it's just like 2 sentences. He says, "Lurie, write whatever the fuck you want about drugs. You have my blessing."
Oh, wow.
And again, that was just enough to kind of kick it in. I bought a plane ticket. I flew out there. I basically just landed on his doorstep. I think he took pity on me, and we've known each other now for let's see, that was 97, so 22 years.
Yeah,
I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. And actually, he ended up being a great collaborator, and I think I grew in the time that I was working with him on this project, and he changed a lot, and he mellowed, and he's still a interesting, temperamental individual, but generally a fun person to be around.
Huh.
I've gone on way too long about the church, but that's kind of how I got with Verse Chorus Press, because then I was able to pitch Verse Chorus on this idea. You guys have already done a Go-Betweens book. Mm-hmm. It worked well for you, and I've got the participation of Kilby, and you've got a network, because a lot of people that like the Go-Betweens also like the church.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover there.
And so, and then Steve Connell from Verse Chorus really became a mentor for me and helped smooth out some rough edges, and so we just kept working, and then the R.E.M. book organically came out of that.
So that's what's interesting. The whole idea, I just, for a sec want to... The notion of getting to... This has happened just, a couple of times. I mean, for me, I'm a writer. I love other writers. There's, but for me, like, as far as hero worship goes, it's musicians. Yeah. It's like, that's what, that's what I always wanted to be. That was the... So, and people who've listened to this show before, I've told this, I'm sure, many times, but I was 24 years old. I was still dabbling with the idea of being a songwriter, but at the time I had kind of crippling stage fright, so I was just writing and making demos at home, and that was something I eventually got over, but it was through other writing. And I had gone to see Robin Hitchcock. He was playing the Hotel Congress in Tucson, and
I was at that show. Wait, what year was this?
2006.
Yes.
Yeah, you were there. Wow,
I was at that show.
That's pretty
great show.
Yeah,
Scott
absolutely.
McCoy and Peter Buck playing.
Yeah. Well, okay, so he came back that year with the Venus 3. So this was an acoustic show.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So this would have probably been just like a little bit earlier in the year or something. Yeah. But so I talked to him after the show. I met him for the first time. I was like, and of course, it was I hadn't been doing any of this yet, so I'm still like not used to just. Anyway, I was like, okay, I'm going to ask like a different sort of question. I'm not going to ask him about a song or something like that. So I'm like, all right, what advice do you have for an aspiring singer-songwriter who has crippling stage fright? And he just said, don't. And I was like, okay. He was really nice. He was a great guy. And then about 10 years later, I got to interview him for this podcast, and
really,
yeah, it was, got to like sit and have a conversation with him, and just really cool guy. We talked about his dad and the Kinks, and because they'd done the soundtrack for the movie version of the novel his dad wrote, which was Percy, and so we talked about. It was great, and I've talked to him several times since then, and it's just kind of weird. You don't think necessarily as a music fan, and it's like Squeeze is my favorite band, and then being able to meet Glenn Tilbrook and then getting on stage and playing guitar with him for a song.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, you don't think that these things happen for some reason, and they're not everybody is like this, but some people are just like happy enough to be playing the music and happy enough to talk about the music, and they just make themselves a little more accessible.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because typically I've found that at least writers, especially ones that have put things out through major publishing houses, are a little less accessible than musicians who are coming through. Like I've been able to talk to people that I never thought I would talk to them on a podcast with a relatively small audience compared to some of the others. It's pretty interesting the way that they're just willing to kind of like sit down with you for an hour and talk. But
I think it may have changed a bit over the years.
Yeah.
It's funny because I always found it, well, not always, but when I was getting started in writing, I found it to be kind of the flip side of what you're talking about, that just about any writer, if I tracked down their email address and wrote to them, they would write back. In musicians, it was harder to connect with. But I think now, because the music industry itself is kind of in a state of turmoil, and in order to survive, you have to kind of take charge of your career and do things like podcasts and things like that. I think the musicians are a lot more open to kind of going out into the Wild West of all of this kind of stuff, and promote themselves on the social media like we were talking about before, and things like that. And some of them do it very artfully and connect with their fans in a really wonderful way that's probably great for them. Something else struck me too, that you had this interest in music, and you had crippling stage fright, and you had an interest in writing, and these were my two interests as well, music and writing. And I kind of, the Kilby show was maybe a part of this. I had to psych myself up so much every time I did any kind of performance. And sometimes it would go great, and sometimes it would be awful. There was one time where I had a panic attack on stage, and so that's what kind of drove me into writing over music. Sort of the advice that Robin Hitchcock gave to you, that both avenues were really creative, but writing, you can kind of control it. You don't have to go out and do readings if you don't want to. You can just write and send it out into the world.
Yeah.
And like you, have gotten a little bit better with the stage fright and the anxiety and stuff like that. But that was kind of the reason why I'm doing writing now. And I still consider myself a musician, but in terms of the time put in. It's been going into writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, what was was the panic attack the sort of fulcrum for you? Where like, all right, I'm going to concentrate on this.
I think so. But with things like that, there's always a danger of creating this neat and tidy storyline with narrative. That. Because writers always do that with everything.
Yeah.
You know? This R.E.M. book probably creates narratives out of things that were just completely random. And so, yeah, that panic attack happened. Did I wake up the next day and decide, okay, from here on out it's writing? Mm-hmm. No, it was kind of a gradual thing. And actually that happened prior to going out and doing that Kilby thing. So I still had the balls to do something crazy like that. But it kind of trickled after that. It was there was a realization that a lot of musicians that build careers for themselves, they do entire tours, and I had enough awareness of my nervous system that I wasn't sure if I would make it through something like that. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't so much a conscious decision, but it's more like, okay, this door is kind of blocked and you've got all this energy and this door is open, and so the energy is kind of going into that door. Yeah. Yeah.
And not everybody can do the Andy Partridge thing and just go off the road and still make records, you know?
Right. But he did have, that was kind of like, if I stayed with music, that was like the model.
Yeah.
But like you said, almost no one does that.
Yeah.
Almost no one can do
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. He's lucky. You know, they did the work initially and he built the following. Right. And, but yeah, I don't know. That's another band where I was like, okay, but maybe if I could do that route, and you have to do all the work to get to that point.
Yeah.
But so when you, at the point that your publisher approaches you and talks about doing the R.E.M. book, mm-hmm. What is your sort of, does it begin popping into your head? Okay, so I kind of know this person and this person. Had you kept in touch with some of these people that you ended up going back to interview?
No, not really. Okay. But I knew that they were all still there. Mm-hmm. And I knew, I was pretty confident I could reconnect with all these people. I sort of knew where to find them. The thing that put it into high gear was we had started kind of talking about this. He had made that suggestion in 2009 after the Church book came out. And then R.E.M. disbanded in 2011. Mm-hmm. And I was having dinner with some friends and said something, I've been thinking about doing something on R.E.M. And my friend said, oh, this is the perfect time to do it. You really should do it. Because at that point, they had just broken up. And so people were kind of suddenly talking about R.E.M. again, and they were reassessing them, and there were mm-hmm. pieces coming out in various publications. And so I thought, oh yeah, I've got to move on this and talk to my publisher, and we got it in gear. But that wasn't really true. That it was only the perfect time to do it if I had then cranked the book out and got it out within the next few months.
Right.
Because now, R.E.M. has been oddly forgotten. You don't hear them in the same breath as Nirvana and stuff like that. I don't. Like when I talk to people about music, and if they know bands from the late 80s, early 90s, they mm-hmm. know Nirvana, and they know the what you mentioned, what is now called alternative, the bands that kind of came out as a result probably of R.E.M. making their big breakthrough. But right. R.E.M., I don't know. To my perception, they sort of got swallowed up by history, and there was some.
Well, how much of that do you think is put into play by the fact that they did make it big for a long time? It was they were everywhere. Mm-hmm. I remember initially it wasn't until I went back and heard some of the, I would have been around 10 when Automatic for the People came out, and that was huge.
It was.
That was everywhere.
It was.
And seeing the Losing My Religion video constantly, and
Right.
and then there was Everybody Hurts, and it was like getting overplayed for a long time. It seemed like they were just getting overplayed, and then like Monster and New Adventures in Hi-Fi came